Lena and I are going to talk about Vermont's greenhouse gas emissions and energy targets. I'm going to start us off with a few slides and then pass over to Lena. So this is a new graph that we've created with the official data from the greenhouse gas inventory recently published by the Agency of Natural Resources. It shows our historical greenhouse gas emissions by sector in the darker colors there on the left from 1990 to 2021, which is the latest year of full inventory data that's been published for Vermont. And to the right, you see the three blue dots that show the requirements, the legal obligations of the Global Warming Solutions Act by January 1st of 2025, 2030, and 2050. I want to share this table. This comes from a recent 4-pager that we put together providing a summary and overview of the latest inventory and forecast. And I know that there's a lot of conversation happening in the state about where do we stand relative to the first obligation of the Solutions Act by January 1st, 2025. Many folks have probably heard claims that Vermont is on track to meet the first legal obligation of the Solutions Act. I just want to pause here so that we can see a comparison between the inventory, the relevant official data that is how our progress is tracked by law, which you see in this column here, versus the data that's being used to support the claim that we're on track, which is the middle column there. And there is a consistent and significant difference between these two sources of data for greenhouse gas emissions. For the 7 years that we have data from the official Vermont greenhouse gas inventory, 2015 to 2021, in comparison to the model that's being pointed to make the on-track claim, there is an average undercounting of emissions in that other model of 550,000 tons per year relative to the official numbers in the inventory. So that's important knowledge in terms of where are these different claims coming from about on track, not on track. Our analysis at EAN is very clear that we believe we are not on track. It's exceedingly unlikely given the objective data that has been published in previous inventories and that we have available from the tax department, that unfortunately, we wish we were, but unfortunately the data does not support that at this point. We wanted to share this graph because often, and we see this right now happening in Vermont, the conversations about costs are often exclusively and narrowly constrained to the costs of acting to reduce climate pollution, rather than the fuller picture and the more complete equation, which would include the benefits, including energy cost savings for moving away from fossil fuels. And also too often ignored are the costs of inaction, or the costs of allowing a high-cost, heavily damaging fossil-fueled status quo to continue. So one way that we can start to put a number on the cost of inaction or the cost of the status quo, the climate pollution that has been created and is continuing to be created, is via something called the social cost of carbon, or more broadly, the social cost of greenhouse gases. So recently, following recommendations from the National Academy of Sciences, the Environmental Protection Agency, the US EPA, recently estimated the social cost of greenhouse gases. And taking those estimates and applying them to the emissions reductions that Vermont would achieve below our 2023 levels between now and 2050, we see that the Global Warming Solutions Act would ensure that Vermont's climate pollution in aggregate would be reduced by over 100 million metric tons and avoiding $25 billion in social and environmental costs and damages. And so oftentimes we've looked at emissions. We've looked at this lower left-hand portion of the graph showing the emissions. Here we're really trying to highlight what's in that upper right-hand corner. What are the avoided costs and the benefits of not polluting at that level, both in terms of reduced pollution and in energy cost savings and societal benefits. And I want to be really clear, this is by EPA's own admission a very conservative estimate, because many of the values of pollution reduction have not yet been estimated from a monetary perspective, including some of these benefits that you see in this new graphic that we've put together on the right of many of the co-benefits of reducing climate pollution. So to make understanding Vermont's greenhouse gas emissions as accessible as possible, EAN, led by Lena, our data manager and research analyst extraordinaire, Lena created an interactive emissions dashboard, which you can find at eanvt.org. It was recently updated by Lena to include the latest inventory data, which you can see a screenshot of here. But the amazing thing is, like, unlike in our annual progress report or in that chart over there, it is not static. So if you want to zoom in on a sector, on a specific year, move around, it's fully interactive, built on Tableau. And so Lena, I think, is going to share a little bit more about that, and also the other component of our dashboards that exist on the EAN website, which is not just our interactive greenhouse gas emissions dashboard, but also tracking progress of the key energy solutions identified in the state's climate action plan. So over to Lena.
Thank you, Jared. Okay, I'm not going to talk anymore about that dashboard, actually. But we've heard a lot today about the need to increase adoption of some of these key solutions, including heat pump water heaters, electric vehicles, et cetera, and weatherization, et cetera. So we are tracking these in another dashboard that we have, the Vermont Energy Dashboard. So we have data on this dashboard through 2022 right now that will be soon updated through 2023. But I wanted to walk through some of the different elements of those and where we're at now. So this slide is showing residential heat pump water heater adoption over time. And right now we're at almost 19,000 heat pump water heaters throughout Vermont. And we are tracking this target relative to, or this progress relative to the 2030 target, which you can see on the middle there. And you can also see that by county across the state. And I have little time, so I'm just going to speed through these. Going over to weatherization, on this one, I really want to point out the year-over-year progress that we're seeing, or lack of progress, in that we've seen a really steady rate of weatherization projects being completed. So we're going to be talking about workforce in a few minutes. This is really as a result of the limited workforce that we have to complete these projects, is what's keeping that annual rate of weatherization projects at around 2,000 projects per year. Cold climate heat pumps, we have seen the most progress toward the 2030 target, and you can see that they are increasing. The annual installation rate is increasing over time here. And then lastly, we have electric vehicles. I showed a different graph on EVs earlier, but this one is breaking it down by all electric and plug-in hybrids. And one of the things you can see on this graph is that the share of all electric vehicles relative to plug-in hybrid electric vehicles is increasing. So they now represent a greater percentage of total EVs. And my last slide here, since we're about to dive into the topic of getting the work done, I just wanted to end on this note about workforce. So meeting Vermont's climate commitments is going to require really historic investments in incentives and rebates, workforce infrastructure, et cetera. And this slide is really highlighting the climate workforce that we have in the state now. And on the right side, you can see the share of employers in the clean energy sector that are reporting hiring difficulties, and that has increased over time. On the left-hand side, we saw the peak in clean energy and climate workforce in, I think that's 2017, and since then it has stayed pretty consistent, gone down a little bit, partially as a result of the pandemic, but our next few speakers are going to dive into that a little bit more. Thank you.